I'm usually never early on Marvel movies like this. This is definitely a change of pace. Usually I'm more behind because I don't often, get the advanced screenings from Marvel movies very easily. But this one I did, so this is definitely happening at a more convenient time all of a sudden. Spider-Man Far From Home is now officially in theaters domestically and internationally. It's starting to roll out one by one in different countries. And if you've not seen it, this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion of the film. And it's important that in this case the spoilers are taken seriously because much like Endgame, a lot wasn't revealed in the trailer. If you saw the trailers, you know that one of the things that was kept in the shadows was Mysterio, which is great because his name is Mysterio. He is definitely mysterious in the trailers because he seems like a hero. If you read the comics, you know he's a villain, so in a way you sort of saw the twist coming that he was actually the main villain of the whole thing, but in my head I knew that was going to happen. And I think everyone knew that was going to happen because it's kind of hard to make Mysterio a good guy. I mean, the guy is literally oozing evil at a point, and he's always a mind manipulator. So obviously, a lot of it seemed like it was manipulation even through the trailers, but I was very impressed with what they did. They actually brought in a few different elements. Now, I can see some people having issues with this because, one of the things that he's doing is essentially, he's upset because Tony Stark did something. Now, I get that that's very similar to the Vulture thing, but one thing I realized with these Spider-Man movies, both of them in the MCU now, is that in a lot of ways, this is exactly what Peter's story has been so far. It's been about trying to be something in place of Tony. And that's exactly what Tony alludes to in Homecoming, and now that Tony's dead from after the events of Endgame, he feels like it's now falling more on his shoulders than it has before. And so he's definitely feeling that the pressure of a sudden of how do I be the next Iron Man? And he has to deal in effect because of that with a lot of Tony's fallout. He also has to deal with the fallout due to the events of Endgame, but he's also dealing with the fact that this mentor, this man who he looked up to for so long, may not have been the nicest guy in the world, and he had screwed over quite a few people. Adrian Toomes in the first film, who became the Vulture, and now Quentin Beck, who created the system that allowed, memories and all sorts of realities to be created, and Tony changed the name and took all credit for it, and so his idea was somehow lost in the dust, and because of that he's assembled this team of people who have been wronged by Stark Industries to basically become this version of a hero that some people can see, but in reality it's all just one big illusion, and he's using these drones that he's created for it. I'll talk more about the drones in a second because I have a funny observation about that, but the idea of his motivation, I can see some people hating it, but like I said, it goes back to that point I made about Peter dealing with a lot of Tony's fallout. And a lot of that has to do with Happy's line later on saying that you're not the next Iron Man, you're never going to be it. Because Tony was a mess. He was a complete, wreck, and I thought that was cool because even though we just saw the guy die and you feel bad that he died, on the other hand, you got to realize, yeah, he did screw a lot of stuff up. So you see the other side of Tony Stark here, and you gotta understand that the man's legacy is a bit tarnished. At least his past definitely is before things changed. But it turns out not only his past, I mean, certain things that he was doing on the side even after the events of the first Iron Man movie and the Avengers and Age of Ultron, because Civil War is when you see that software that Tony is demonstrating at MIT. So I guess in a way that's interesting, and I feel like that is definitely a part of Peter building up his reputation right now. I'm hoping they don't keep it going down the line. They might not, considering the way this ends, but we'll see. Let's talk about the drones thing very quickly. I couldn't help but notice it, but if you've played the Spider-Man 2 game, which came out in 2004, if you've ever played that PC version, which a lot of people kind of go against, Mysterio had drones that would sometimes fly towards Peter if you did not, attack it in time, and would explode on him, and they would, give you some damage. In the movie, the drones are coming after him or shooting at him, and if they're not, they trying to collide into him so that they would explode and basically injure Peter. So I guess that's a reference. I thought this was the ultimate sort of Mysterio because it had the comic stuff in it with some of the sorcery stuff, even though it is more scientific in this movie. But at the same time, it had some of the game elements in it too, with the machinery and all that. So I thought there's a nice little meld of both the worlds, and that way he became pretty much exactly the version of Mysterio I wanted to see in a movie, and I was very happy with it. This, of course, leads throughout the film because later, when you're watching the first half of the film, again, now that you know who Quentin Beck is and what he's up to, you suddenly ask a lot of questions about what part of it was real, how much of it was real, and how much of it was a manipulation. So many questions come up, and you have to look at it maybe in a different way. That maybe a lot of that first half is just we're seeing what we think we're seeing may not actually be the case. I mean, there's so many weird things all of a sudden, and perceptions. Maybe it's just me who is feeling that, but you'll definitely get that if you look into it a little bit. And it makes sense because later on in the end, when you get to his final line, he says, "You'll see, Peter. People will believe anything." So, like I said, this film takes place pretty much after the events of Endgame, and they do a nice job of showing you how the snap's effects were reversed so quickly. Like, it felt like it was out of nowhere. In a way, time was so weird that it felt like they'd never left. It felt like people had just gone to sleep for a little bit and then they'd just suddenly come back, and it was 5 years later. And it is heavily implied that all of Peter Parker's friends had died. So is that convenient to the plot, I guess, for everyone to just not remember it and move on? I guess so, but I mean, come on. It's a Marvel movie. It's a superhero movie. There's gonna be some conveniences like that. That's fine. I did find it funny though that the basketball players just suddenly appeared out of nowhere back on the court. That was pretty funny. I did not expect that. That was pretty fun. And that there were some abnormalities. One of the students named Brad had suddenly aged 5 years all of a sudden. That didn't make any sense to a lot of people, but apparently it happened. And this whole science strip thing definitely feels weird because it's happening so soon after this event, and Peter's just trying to have a normal life. Now, I found that also really cool because what do you say after everything you've just seen? Your big mentor, father figure of sorts just died. You just died yourself earlier. A guy snapped half the universe out of existence. You just fought him again, and his army. I mean, what do you think? I mean, you don't just suddenly go back to work. Part of you is like, I need some time. I need to process everything that's happened. I need a break right now. So when Nick Fury calls him back in, you can already understand Peter's hesitation, and I want a normal life. I just want to impress MJ for a bit. And I gotta say, Zendaya did a great job in this movie, and Tom Holland with this movie has just proven to me that I want Spider-Man played by him for the rest of my life if possible. And Tom Holland apparently wants to do that. He wants to play him into his 40s, 50s even. I'm down for that, honestly. And I think it's good because everybody seems to like him as Spider-Man. At least 99% of people like him as Spider-Man, which is enough for you to make all kinds of movies with this guy, and I hope they do because he's great. You don't want to lose him. Don't lose him. He's perfect. Also, don't lose Zendaya, because now I like the connection that he and MJ have in this universe. I do appreciate that, and I think it's really cute and sweet, and they're doing a great job of it. I did say there were a few little nitpicks I had throughout, even though I gave it a perfect score, and that is also because of the feeling I had towards it. I would say the small little nitpicks I had were some of the high school stuff. One of my little hiccups with it was that there were points when the Ned and Betty Brant romance became a thing, and I'm like, that didn't have to be there, but I get the whole high school awkwardness thing. I understand the whole motivation behind having it in there. Fine, why not? The Brad thing was definitely weird because it was definitely like pulling back from things. I mean, I guess he basically did what Flash Thompson would usually do in this kind of a situation. But then they brought it around well in that, hey, just stop. Just stop it. Nobody cares. Stop asking for attention. Like, okay, that's all right. At least I do like the way that paid off finally. Very small little things like that. So one thing I really wanted to talk about in the spoiler-free review that I could not talk about is when Peter finds out that Quentin is really the bad guy. The sequence where Quentin confronts him and you have that illusion sequence where Peter just goes down this horrifying rabbit hole and sees all kinds of things is something that I have dreamt of for seeing for like 18 years. I've been wanting to see that since forever. And I'm so glad we now live in an age where they can make scenes like that happen. I loved it. It felt like a horror movie. There's some imagery in there that's definitely gonna freak kids out. In fact, if you're somebody who is upset over Tony Stark dying, then this is gonna be upsetting because you see Tony Stark in one of the illusions, like climb out of the grave in a rusted up, broken down Iron Man suit, and his skull is visible through the broken mask. So that's a haunting visual for you if you are feeling bad about Tony's death to this day. One thing I do want to say is that I understand why Kevin Feige and Marvel have chosen this to be the ending to Phase 3 and not, say, Endgame. Because this feels like a good bookend. It feels like a nice place to end it, and especially with the ending, which I'm coming to it right after I say this one last sentence. I think that it leaves it in an interesting place and it sets up a really interesting world that we're yet to see, especially with the two end credit scenes, which now we can finally come to. I watched the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy many, many times as a kid. I love those movies, and if you ask me one of my favorite aspects about them, I would say it was J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. And part of me has always wondered if we'll ever see that again, because he was definitely a major highlight in those movies, and he became this character. He's one of the best casting choices for that character you could ever make. In fact, he is that character. So, in the first end credits scene, after MJ and Spidey take a swing around and everything's great, there's a news flash that happens, and you see that before he died in the final battle against Peter, Quentin Beck recorded a little video, which makes me which reminds me I need to address one thing. I'll get back to that in a second, but before that. And he says that Spider-Man's trying to kill me, and it paints Spider-Man as a major menace all of a sudden. And the reporter on the news channel says this caught the eye of several publishing departments, especially the Daily Bugle. And right after that, my audience turned into a rave concert because guess whose face shows up? It's J. Jonah Jameson, J.K. Simmons himself. And to this day, I've never experienced this. My friend started hugging me. He was so happy. He could have cried. I think he cried. I cried of happiness. It was the most amazing thing. You never expect to see that again. And it happened. The entire theater, I swear to God, I have never heard anything louder in my entire life. I was screaming at the top of my lungs because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I'm gonna give it. I don't usually do that in a theater, but you know what? You got me this time, movie. And he actually plays the footage that reveals that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And very similarly to Homecoming, this time it's Peter who says, "What the fuck?" And it cuts out. Which is a great way to end this movie, because you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? Regarding that final battle though, so when London is happening and you see how Quentin's creating the illusions using the drone tech and the tech that Tony had invented, it causes a lot more damage, and that's how he amplifies the fact that there is definitely something. And for the longest time, Nick Fury and Maria Hill are being taken for a ride, and they catch on to the bullshit too, and Happy warns them, accordingly that it's about to happen. While Spidey is battling the drones and destroying them and making sure that people don't keep getting damaged, because the drones are very real this time, and they're definitely causing a lot more harm and collateral damage. In that particular battle, after it's all over, Quentin gets shot by one of the misfiring drones and he dies. He tries to kill Peter at one point in time by creating an illusion of himself, but he's actually hiding on the other side. But Peter stops him. That was definitely a chilling moment that I thought was really cool, because like, oh my god, you almost shot Peter Parker in the head with a Glock. Jesus Christ. And then Quentin says the line, "Peter, people will believe anything, you'll see." And at this time, Peter has got glasses from Tony and saying that this has a programming in it called Edith, and which stands for "Even Dead, I Am the Hero," which is the most Tony Stark thing in the world. And she says, yeah, the illusions are gone now for good. But once you finally see the last scene, it raises a couple of questions. Like, how do we know that Edith hasn't been maybe a bit reprogrammed to say exactly those words so that it throws Peter off? Maybe it wasn't, because part of me is like, wouldn't Edith have basically been like, "Hey, Peter, by the way, there's a camera over there that recorded everything and has recorded this confession that you, by the way, are Spider-Man, and that's going to be broadcast." That, or B, it was shot at some point before Peter intercepted Mysterio, and it's on the thumb drive that one of the guys just disconnects from the laptop after Quentin dies. Maybe it's that. I don't know, but that would be interesting. Either way, Peter's gonna have a hell of a time. Also, one quick little tidbit: Peter flies through a building at one point in time, and not more glides with his web wings or whatever. And it has this garden sitting around it, and I couldn't help but notice that was the repurposed Avengers Tower. Because if you remember Homecoming, someone bought out the tower, and you're wondering who is that? Because you don't see the logo in Infinity War, the one split second you see the tower, because that's done for. So I'm just kind of wondering who that is, and I kind of want it to be Norman Osborn. I want that tower to say Oscorp when you get to the next Spider-Man movie or the next MCU film. If Oh, and one more thing, if you're one of those people who didn't think Captain Marvel should be a part of the MCU and that she should be gone, well, I've got news for you. That universe is a part of this film, especially with the second post-credit scene where you find out that Nick Fury and Maria Hill are Skrulls. It's Talos and his wife. So yeah, they're gonna be doing a lot with that universe, I have a feeling. So yeah, if you haven't seen Captain Marvel yet, that scene's gonna be confusing. And I know because when I walked out of the theater, there were at least 5 to 10 guys who were in front of me complaining about what the hell was that? I haven't seen Captain Marvel. Like, yeah, well, probably should have. But yeah, in the end, I did love this movie quite a bit. I thought it was fantastic, and I do recommend everyone check it out. I thought this was a really great conclusion to Phase 3. I do love it more than Homecoming, which I did also really, really enjoy, and I think it's really great. I think it gets a lot of things right. Yes, there are certain things which I think were a little iffy, but this was definitely, like I said, it was the way I felt towards it was just like perfect. This is exactly what I want, and I was very happy overall. I mean, it just spoke to me in a way. So yeah, definitely this was definitely a really fantastic film. Not my favorite Marvel movie. It's definitely in the top 5 or 6 though now, so it's pretty high up there. I would say Endgame is definitely my number one film now that I've seen all of Phase 3, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that for now. If I've left out anything, let me know in the comments. If there's something you want to discuss more, let me know. We'll definitely do that. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoy Spider-Man Far From Home, and let me know what you guys thought of it, if you agree with my thoughts, if you don't agree with my thoughts. And I'll see you guys at the movies. Bye.